thank you all for being here today. This is Dr. John Scott for another exciting episode of Influent. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Harrison Keller, president of University of North Texas and the Denton Division, and is the third largest campus in the state of Texas. Well, thank you, President Keller, for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you and your audience today.
We enter the medical students and all the residents in the state of Texas. What my goal is today is to let them know more about you and what UNT has to do with that person's education. And then please explain your background and how you got here today. It's a very exciting background. And I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So, again, Dr. Scott, I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. So I am a sixth generation Texan. I grew up in the panhandle of Texas in a town called Plainview. And if you know that part of Texas, that's a farming community, about halfway between Lubbock and Amarillo. And my mom's family had been out there a long time. My grandfather was a cotton farmer, and both my parents were school teachers. And so as a teacher's kid, that means you kind of grow up in their classrooms. And I was a good student, and I got a great upbringing in Plainview in a lot of ways, with just the community and values, and great friends and mentors there. My music education was also very good. We had a great band directors, and I used to go down to Texas Tech every week for lessons there. But my academic preparation was not as strong. It's what folks in Texas call a property poor school district. And so what that meant in practice is I ran out of math courses to take by the end of my junior year of high school. And then I wanted to go off to school, someplace with trees and water. And I went off to University of Notre Dame in northern Indiana. That was tough on a couple of fronts. First, I had no idea what real winter was actually like until I got up there. And the second thing, though, is that I found myself suddenly sitting next to kids who had gone to some of the best high schools in America and had, say, 2 years of calculus. And here I am in the honors calculus class because I'm in the honors program, but I hadn't even had math to take at all my senior year. So it took me about 3 semesters to recalibrate to the new expectations. And that I bring that up because that experience of transitioning from high school to college really stuck with me. And that's become an area of specialization for me that I continue to work on, and I've worked on throughout my career. So from Notre Dame, I went to graduate school in philosophy at Georgetown and got a great education there. My area of specialization was around moral and political philosophy. And then I came back to Texas to work in the legislature, and that started what became a 25-year career where I had the opportunity to work on almost every aspect of Texas public and higher education budget policy. So worked in legislature, got picked up by UT Austin. I worked at UT Austin a while, then back to the legislature, then back to UT. I was a faculty member and an administrator there. And then for the last 5 years, I served as the Commissioner of Higher Education for the state of Texas. And so that was a great experience, and got to work very closely with our state leadership, Governor Abbott and his office, and the legislative leadership, Governor Patrick, Speaker Phelan, and the key members on both sides of the aisle. And we got a lot done for higher education, and culminated in a historic legislative session for higher education. But I've gotten to know in that role at the coordinating board and in my other jobs, a lot of colleges and universities across the state and across the country, and so I knew some the folks at UNT. I got to know Chancellor Michael Williams when he was the president of the Health Science Center, and we sort of clicked. And so when this opportunity came up where UNT was looking for a new president, and I appreciated Chancellor Williams' vision and willingness to think outside the box, to do things differently, to move faster. Um, Same kind of spirit and leadership from our board of regents, which is you don't necessarily find across all the boards and all the system leaderships across the state and across the country. And then I say now that I'm at UNT, it's really a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. We are, as you mentioned, the third largest university in Texas. We've been recently the fastest growing university with more than 46,000 students. If you look at our students, one of the things you'll notice right away is our students look like Texas. We have about 40% of our students are Pell eligible students, so they come from very low income backgrounds. We have more than 40% of our students who are first generation college students, and they're blazing trails for their families and for their communities, not just to be the first person to enroll in college, but our commitment needs to be that they're the first to graduate from college. And so there's no place I'd rather be than UNT, and this is an enormous privilege now to get to be at this university. I will say I've only been president now for about 10 weeks, so I'm definitely still drinking from a fire hose, but I feel like I've got the best job in Texas.
Well, it's quite an honor to have you. And I wanted the medical students and residents to have your background for a moment to feel what it's like to be in your situation. Would you please elaborate a little bit more on your contacts with legislature, and why do you think that is so important?
Yeah. So a couple of reasons that I think having some knowledge of the legislative process can be incredibly valuable. And I would certainly encourage medical students and residents to learn about the state policymaking process, learn about the appropriations process. I've known folks who've even taken some time to work very closely with legislative offices, or even kind of do internships or projects for legislative offices, as I did earlier in my career, which was like a whole another graduate level education. Really important to understand how you go from an idea to a bill to a law to actually implementing that law through the rulemaking process. And there are a whole lot of ways that things can go off the tracks. There are a whole lot of things that can go wrong. But there are a lot of ways things can go right. And so I had the opportunity to work, again, very closely with our state leadership. And, the cartoon version of a politician is people will say that they're only focused on the next election, or they're only focused 2 years down the road. I didn't find that to be the case at all, working with our state leadership, working with our Texas legislators, and particularly going in this last legislative session. So when I talked to the governor, when I talked to the appropriators, speaker, lieutenant governor, as we were getting ready for the last legislative session, literally the question that was on the table and that they pressed me on is, well, what are the investments we need to make that 30, 40 years from now, people are going to be glad that we made? And that was the attitude that we took going into the legislative session, and we made historic changes. The reason we made historic changes is because we had very serious state leaders who were willing to take a long view, and who understand that if we're going to be competitive as a state, the governor gets that we've got to compete in terms of our talent and in terms of our ability to compete on those frontiers of knowledge and information technology. So people may not appreciate that now Texas leads the nation in state support for university research, particularly because of the investments that were made in this last legislative session. They created new funds to help lift up universities like North Texas and Texas Tech and University of Houston and Texas State, so they can emerge as leading national institutions. We are now the 8th largest economy in the world, and we're on the cusp of becoming the 7th largest economy in the world. And that's really profound when you think about it. That we're interested in what other states are doing. Of course, we compete with other states sometimes, but we have to think about how Texas competes on a global scale and on a global stage, and that's increasingly going to depend on what we're able to achieve through higher education. Of course, your residents they're seeing that now and how fast the practice of medicine and medical education are changing with integrating new technologies, with integrating new devices, astounding number of new drugs, and more drugs that you're authorized to prescribe than any human could keep track of. And so we're increasingly relying on technologies to ensure that you're able to provide the very best care to patients. We're seeing those kinds of transformations across every industry, including in higher education right now.
One of the things that is very important that's going on now is the advent of AI. In medicine, we call it augmented intelligence, and everyone else calls it artificial intelligence. Tell us a little bit what you think about where we were and where we're heading with AI. Are we going to be replaced?
So I think the right way to think about it is more along the augmented intelligence line. So there are things that AI is better at than humans, and if you're just thinking in terms of queries, being able to recall information, like even when I'm at my best, I'm gonna be able to recall some percentage of any conversation or lecture I attend or anything I read, versus the AI is going to be able to have much more effective recall of that information. Now, if you're talking about being able to put that information together in creative ways, I think where we're going very quickly is where we're going to be relying on the AI to augment what we're doing in research, what we're doing in our problem solving, what we're doing in the practice of medicine and other professions, where you can think about it like where the AI is sort of a very highly effective research assistant that could distill and summarize information, could go and scan and find all the available information, say on known drug interactions, or on what kinds of treatments have worked well for certain kinds of cancers, or to address certain kinds of diseases. Well, that's the kind of thing that could have taken many months or even years for humans to distill just the way that we normally practice, the way that research normally works. And we're going to be able to move much, much, much faster. So I don't see it replacing us anytime soon. What I see happening is that AI is going to become a really powerful tool that we integrate into our problem solving and into our practices. Of course, one of the things I'm thinking about now, especially as a university president, is how we integrate AI into our teaching and learning, how we integrate AI into the operations of our universities so we can be much more effective, but also so we can prepare students to live and work in a world where AI is much more ubiquitous. integrated into all of our everyday technologies. It's moving incredibly fast right now. And so there are a few places where folks are trying to figure out, well, how do we ban AI, or how do we, they're worried about, well, if the students and the colleges and universities are able to use AI, then is there going to be so much rampant cheating that it'll undermine what we're doing in higher education? I think the answer is short answer is I don't think so. But we do have to adapt the way we're teaching. We do have to adapt the kinds of tests we give our students, the kind of knowledge checks we give, and also think about how we can leverage the power of AI so that we can be even more effective and provide a much more personalized learning experience for our students.
One thing that's very important, and I really appreciate that, you're always concerned about the opportunity and the time it takes to get an education. With all the new things that are coming along, how does a college student prepare for higher education, medical school, residencies, things of that, with all the different things going on for distractions nowadays?
Well, I have three teenagers of my own, so I feel like I've got a front row seat to how technology can provide all kinds of distractions, but also all different kinds of new learning experiences. So one of my daughters is about to start her driver's education, which she can do. She can start at any time at her own pace and work through quickly and have a sort of more efficient assessments of whether she understands the rules of the road than I did when I did a very traditional driver's ed class at 7 o'clock in the morning, taught by one of our coaches there at Plainview High School. So when I talk to employers about what they're looking for, or when I talk to high school teachers and high school educators about what we're looking for, one of the common threads is that the pace of change is only accelerating. So you have to be ready to learn new things quickly, and to integrate new kinds of technologies into your practice and be much more flexible in how you do that. So that's something that everybody's looking for in education. That's something that all the employers are going to be looking for. It's something that's essential. Um, Another thing that is really striking to me when is in these conversations, when folks talk about what people need to do to prepare. So sure, there are some core math skills that you need to have, right? The AI and the AI tutors can help you get there a lot faster, and that's something the AI is very good at. There's some science that you need to know, and you need to understand some of those foundational principles if you're going to be successful in medical school. And that's, of course, something else the AI is very good at. Something the AI is less good at right now, that is going to be really critical, though, is give the communication skills. Can you work effectively in a team? Can you present clearly? Can you write? Can you communicate? So those are sort of the foundational. Sometimes people will call them durable skills that everybody is going to need to master. So you need to be able to work with the technology, learn new things fast, leverage it where you can to make sure that you've got the foundations are there in your knowledge, and but you also you need to lean in even more, perhaps, on that human element of being able to work together effectively.
Very good. Now, while I have you, I would like to switch subjects, and this is really important: mental health, because this is something the medical students and residents are seeing is the high rate of burnout. Have you seen this in the higher education level? Do you have any ideas how we're going to cope with this going forward? And is
Yeah.
it due to all the knowledge that's coming out nowadays versus 50 years ago? What are your thoughts and insights? And really, this is one of the main reasons I wanted you here today. Is someone of your exposure experience, you've seen this. So I want to kind of pick your brain as to what are we supposed to do about it. And
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah. So I appreciate the question because one of the things that uh, we were already seeing warning signs on before the pandemic were around students' mental health. So if you look at the generation of students that have been coming through school, coming into medical schools these last several years, um, and you compare that to studies and surveys, say by Pew and Gallup and other sources. So there are a number of indicators of well-being where students are much better off than they've ever been, and where we see a lot lower rates of some risky behaviors than we've seen with some prior generations. But there's two areas where generally uh, there I would say there were cause for concern. One of those would be on uh, students' prospects for upward mobility. Like, are you going to be better off than your parents? Some of that is because of just the nature of our workforce is changing. So it used to be the case folks would go to higher education to improve their standard of living. Now, more and more, it's essential. If you just want to maintain your standard of living, you got to go to college. Could be different kind of college, could be a technical college or a community college, but you're going to have education beyond a high school diploma if you want to get a good job. And that's the case more and more. In fact, what I'd heard from the Texas Workforce Commission right before I left the position as commissioner was 92% of our net new jobs in Texas require education and training beyond high school diplomas. That's a fundamental change. The other issue where students are not doing as well is around mental health. We saw that before the pandemic, especially with high rates of anxiety, and then that was exacerbated tremendously by the pandemic, and we've not bounced back. So what we're seeing across higher education right now is we've never seen so much demand for academic remediation as a lot of students lost ground when everybody's classes went online and they were not able to get quality instruction. Um, and the other thing that happened is that many more students, when they were isolated from their teachers, from their friends, um, send them into a spiral, and we lost a lot of ground. So we've never seen so much demand for student mental health services, and that's still a concern. Especially a lot of concerns around anxiety. Now, of course, your medical students are going to be some of the highest performing students in school, and it's become incredibly competitive for students to get into medical school. So when I was coming through college, I remember a friend of mine who was he did very well in his pre-med classes, and he did well in some of his other classes, but he had about a 3.5 GPA, I think. Not sure he would get into medical school these days. Now it's much more unforgiving on the kinds of grades and test scores you need to be able to get into medical school, and then you have to get into a residency, and it's incredibly high pressure. So there's a lot of the medical students, a lot of medical residents report they have very high rates of burnout. So what do we do about this? Well, I think one of the things that is important for us to do, especially for very high achievers, is we need to change some of the narrative around the way we think about mental health and the way we think about law. There is some of that narrative saying, well, if you're strong and you're a strong performer, then you should be able to sort of be tough and shake this off and not have to deal with these issues. So that unfortunately can backfire, right? Where folks will tamp things down and they don't take care of issues, let things fester, and they don't necessarily go away. Sometimes they get worse over time. So we've got to have more, I think, more acceptance that we need to take care of our mental health, and that's something that we need to keep an eye on, just like we need to take care of other aspects of our health. But on anxiety and stress in particular, I think one of the things that's been a little destructive is that there's sometimes been a tendency for folks to tell students or to tell their own kids um, that stress is a bad thing, right? And when they're feeling stress, that's something that we need to try to find a way to alleviate and remove. And in the most extreme examples would be the kind of snowplow parenting, and I'm going to try to clear the way for you so you don't encounter any hardships, you don't encounter any stress, and that might work okay until all of a sudden somebody has to deal with real adversity, maybe for the first time, and then maybe don't have the tools that they need to deal with that. So, what one of the things that I think is helpful is if we realize that that stress is actually like it's a physiological symptom of like here's a situation that you need to pay attention to, that it changes the way that the blood flows, so that you can respond to a situation that demands your attention. And so that's a normal thing. Now, of course, if it goes off the charts, you're so flooded with stress hormones, you can't function, right? So I'm not talking about that. But what I would say is that that if we see experiencing stress as not something to avoid at all costs, but as something that's a normal response to something that's really challenging, to something that it demands your attention, and helps you have the tools that your body needs to be able to work through that situation. Well, that's a different kind of narrative that you don't often hear from a lot of parents, from a lot of schools, and I don't think it does kids a service to try to just remove all the obstacles, to remove all of the barriers for them, because at some point you're going to need to be able to overcome adversity. It's inevitable. Everybody's going to need those tools, particularly folks who are going into medicine.
Thank you. And what I would like to do is summarize all this today. President Keller, thank you for all your time. First off, you talked about his background, getting a PhD, and also he didn't tell you he was a drum major at Notre Dame. I think that's quite impressive, by the way. So he's a very humble man, and he wouldn't even tell us about it. And then at the UMK football game, he led the band. He went down there and led them. So quite a finisher we have here.
I have to say, a lot of what I learned about leadership and about accountability, I learned on the marching band, with marching band and on the field, because when you make a mistake when you're leading a marching band, everybody knows, and you get a lot of feedback from the audience in real time. So that was a unbelievable experience for me to get to lead the band of the Fighting Irish when I was younger, and then to get to be up in front of course, one of the very finest college marching bands, the Mean Green Brigade.
That's very impressive. First off, okay, you talk about leadership, you talk about advocacy, he talked about AI, education, and last, one of the most important things is mental health. I think it's been a great honor to have President Keller. I really wanted the medical students or residents that have gone past this time, but I wanted him to give us his insight. I was very impressed when I interviewed President Keller. I knew right then and there he was the guy we needed, and he has a vision for the future, and we are so fortunate to have him today. I really want to thank you for all your time and taking time out of your busy schedule. And I'm sorry the camera didn't look on my side, but we got the better looking guy on it anyway. Thank you, Glenn and Keller.
I don't know if that's the case, but yeah, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, Dr. Scott, and to visit a little bit with your audience. So thanks very much for including me.
Thank you, sir.